In the beginning, there was a garden where every leaf sang with the voice of paradise itself. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and honeysuckle, and light fell like liquid gold through the ancient trees. Two souls walked there in perfect harmony, their laughter echoing through valleys that had never known sorrow or shame. But in that garden of endless wonder, one creature watched them with eyes that burned like coals in the gathering dusk. What if the serpent in Eden was not just a snake, but something far more ancient and terrible? The creature that slithered through the grass was not merely cunning. It was the embodiment of rebellion itself, wearing scales like armor. This was no ordinary beast that spoke to Eve beneath the tree of knowledge that fateful day. Have you ever felt a presence watching you, whispering doubts into the quiet corners of your mind? The serpent's voice was smooth as silk, dripping with honey that concealed a poison more deadly than any venom. It did not roar or threaten, but asked a simple question that would shatter the foundations of creation. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in this paradise He has given you? The question hung in the air like smoke, curling around Eve's thoughts with fingers she could not see. Not just a question, but a seed of doubt planted in soil that had never known the bitter taste of mistrust. Eve stood before the tree, her hand reaching toward fruit that gleamed like rubies in the fading afternoon light. The serpent coiled closer, its scales catching the sun like shattered mirrors reflecting 1,000 broken promises. Behind those reptilian eyes lurked an intelligence that predated the mountains, an ancient hatred that burned with cold fire. This creature had once stood in the presence of the Almighty, clothed in light and crowned with morning stars. But pride had become a poison in its heart, and it fell like lightning from the heavens above. Now it sought to drag humanity down into the same abyss of rebellion that had consumed its own soul. The serpent whispered that God was withholding something precious, that divinity itself could be stolen, like forbidden fruit. "You will not surely die," the creature hissed, its forked tongue tasting the air, thick with temptation and fear. "Your eyes will be opened wide, and you will be like God Himself, knowing good and evil in all their terrible glory." What would you do if someone promised you the power to become more than you were ever meant to be? Eve reached out and plucked the fruit, its skin breaking beneath her fingers with a sound like the tearing of heaven itself. The juice ran down her chin like tears she had not yet learned to shed, sweet and bitter all at once. She turned to Adam, holding out the forbidden fruit with hands that trembled with a new and terrible knowledge. He took it without question, and together they bit into the flesh of their own undoing, sealing humanity's fate with a single choice. In that moment, the garden held its breath, and every creature fell silent, as if mourning what had just been lost forever. Their eyes were opened, just as the serpent had promised, but what they saw was not divinity shining like the sun. They saw their own nakedness, their own vulnerability, and shame crashed over them like a wave of ice-cold water. The serpent watched from the shadows, its laughter silent but echoing through dimensions humans could no longer perceive or understand. Who was this creature that could speak with such authority, that could twist truth into lies with such practiced ease? Ancient texts whisper of a being called the Accuser, the Adversary, the one who stands opposed to all that is good and holy. In the courts of heaven, he had been called Lucifer, the light-bearer, the most beautiful of all created beings that ever were. But beauty had curdled into vanity, and worship had twisted into a hunger for power that could never be satisfied or quenched. He had led a rebellion among the angels, a third of heaven's host following him into the abyss of eternal darkness. Cast down from glory, he became the dragon, the ancient serpent, the father of lies, who prowls the earth, seeking whom he may devour. In Eden, he found his first human victims, and the taste of their fall was sweeter to him than all the fruits that grew in paradise. But why would such a powerful being concern itself with two fragile humans, walking in a garden at the edge of creation? Because humanity was made in the image of God himself, crowned with glory and honor, despite being formed from common dust. The serpent's hatred burned like acid in its heart, for these creatures of clay were given the love he had forfeited through pride. If he could not ascend to heaven's throne, then he would drag God's beloved children down into the pit he had made his home. The garden grew dark as storm clouds gathered overhead, and thunder rolled like the voice of judgment, echoing across the sky. Adam and Eve heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the evening, his footsteps like distant drums. They hid themselves among the trees, their hearts pounding with a fear they had never known in all their days of innocence. "Where are you?" called the voice that had spoken the stars into being, gentle yet terrible in its perfect love. Adam emerged from the shadows, his voice breaking as he confessed that he was afraid, because he was naked and ashamed. "Who told you that you were naked?" asked the Lord, and the question hung heavy with sorrow that shook the foundations of the earth. "Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat, the only boundary I placed in this paradise of freedom?" The silence that followed was louder than any thunder, and in it the serpent coiled tighter, savoring its terrible victory over innocence. What if the true tragedy was not just the eating of the fruit, but the shattering of trust between Creator and creation? Adam pointed to Eve, and Eve pointed to the serpent, and the chain of blame stretched like iron links forged in the fire of guilt. "The woman you gave me," Adam said, his words dripping with accusation. "She gave me the fruit and I ate without question." "The serpent deceived me," Eve whispered, her voice small and broken. "And I believed its lies more than I trusted your love." Not just a simple act of disobedience, but a fracture in the very fabric of relationship that had defined their existence until now. The Lord turned to the serpent, and his voice was like the rumble of mountains splitting apart beneath the weight of divine judgment. "Because you have done this, you are cursed above all livestock and all wild animals that roam the face of the earth. You will crawl on your belly through the dust, and dust you will eat all the days of your miserable existence. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers, through all the generations to come. He will crush your head with his heel, and you will strike his heel. But your wound will be fatal, and his will be victorious." In that moment, a promise was spoken that would echo through 4,000 years of human history, and beyond into eternity. A promise that one day, a child born of woman would rise up and defeat the ancient serpent once and for all. The serpent slithered away into the darkness, but its work was far from finished in the hearts of humanity it had corrupted. Throughout history, it would whisper the same lies in different languages, wearing different faces, but speaking the same poisonous words. "You can be like God," it would hiss to every generation, offering power and knowledge at the price of their very souls. But the promise remained, a seed of hope planted in the soil of judgment, waiting for the right moment to bloom into salvation. Adam and Eve were clothed by God himself, covered in the skins of animals whose blood was shed to hide their shame. The first sacrifice, the first death in a world that had known only life, a shadow of a greater sacrifice yet to come. They were sent from the garden, an angel with a flaming sword standing guard at the gates they could never enter again. Behind them, paradise faded like a dream, and ahead lay a world of thorns and thistles, sweat and sorrow and death. But they carried with them the promise, whispered in the wind, that one day the serpent's head would be crushed beneath the Savior's heel. Centuries passed, like grains of sand through an hourglass, and the world grew dark with the serpent's influence spreading like a plague. But in the fullness of time, a baby's cry pierced the night in a stable in Bethlehem, and heaven held its breath in wonder. The seed of the woman had come at last, born not in a palace, but in the humblest of places, wrapped in strips of cloth. The ancient serpent recognized him and trembled, for this child carried the light that had been lost in Eden's fall so long ago. For 33 years, the serpent tried every weapon in its arsenal, every temptation it had perfected over millennia of practice. In the wilderness, it offered Jesus the kingdoms of the world, the same lie it had whispered to Eve beneath the tree. But where Adam and Eve had fallen, Jesus stood firm, his words like a sword cutting through the serpent's deceptions with perfect truth. "It is written," he said, and those words carried the weight of eternity, the authority of the one who had spoken creation into being. The serpent recoiled, but it had one final weapon, one last desperate gamble to prevent the promise from coming to pass at last. If it could kill the promised seed, if it could destroy the one who had come to crush its head, then victory would still be within reach. On a hill called Calvary, the serpent struck its blow, driving nails through the hands and feet of the one who had come to save. The sky grew dark as midnight at noon, and the earth shook as if it could not bear the weight of such terrible injustice and suffering. For 3 days the serpent celebrated, believing it had won the war that began in Eden beneath the shadow of the forbidden tree. But on the 3rd day, as dawn broke over Jerusalem, a stone rolled away from a tomb with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. Death could not hold him. The grave could not contain him, for he was life itself, breaking free from the chains of mortality. The serpent's head was crushed beneath the heel of the risen one, and its power was broken forever by the blood of the Lamb. The ancient lie was exposed in the light of resurrection, and the promise spoken in Eden was fulfilled, at last, in victory and glory. Today, the serpent still slithers through the world, still whispering its lies to anyone who will listen with an open ear. But its fate is sealed, its doom is certain, and its time is running out like sand through fingers that can no longer hold it. One day, the dragon will be cast into the lake of fire, and there will be no more serpents in the garden that God will make new. Have you heard the serpent's voice in your own life, promising you power and knowledge at the cost of your very soul? The same choice that faced Eve in Eden faces each of us every day, in 1,000 small decisions and whispered temptations. But we are not alone in this battle, for the one who crushed the serpent's head walks with us through every trial and every test. His victory is our victory, his power is our strength, and his promise is our hope that will never fade or fail us. The serpent in Eden was never just a snake, but the beginning of a war that would rage across the ages until the final day. And in that war, we stand on the side of the victor, clothed in his righteousness, covered by his sacrifice that purchased our freedom. The garden was lost, but a greater garden awaits, where the tree of life grows beside rivers of crystal clear water flowing with healing. There the ancient serpent will be no more, and we will walk with God in the cool of the evening, just as Adam and Eve once did. And this time, nothing will ever separate us from his love again, for the promise spoken in Eden has been fulfilled forever and always.